like it when people do this, when it's like they have already come up with an idea and they're just saying, so how do you feel about this? Do you approve of this? And then they'll say, oh yeah, well, young people have fed into this. And it's like, well, no, young people have approved of it when you've asked them a very specific question. Young people haven't fed into the design of it. Like, I think in order to be the best work with young people that it can be, young people need to be involved in as many stages as possible.
So sometimes it can be difficult to say negative things in a group. So we sent out a survey to YAG members about the challenges they might have faced during co-production with Triumph. And a few YAG members said that evening meetings can be particularly tiring, as well as the fact they can be frustrating to find times where everyone is available, as we have people who are in work or school or college and everyone has a different timetable. Some people may also find it difficult to share views and ideas in a group, especially now that Triumph has moved all work online. So, for example, when I first joined Triumph, I was really reluctant to speak out in meetings and stuff. Just because I was just afraid of not being articulate, I suppose, because I was with all these researchers and so on. But in being actually in the residential helped me feel a lot more confident in expressing my views. Feeling bureaucratic, this is sort of inherent with working with any university, but Triumph staff do try and minimize this, but occasionally it can be overwhelming still. And finding a pace that suits everyone. We have a diverse group of 16 young people in the YAG, so we are bound to work at different speeds. Sometimes people think the YAG works too slow, and sometimes people think the YAG works too fast.
But there's a comment in the chat from Laura who's kind of saying she's grappling with how to include young people really authentically in her PhD when it's a pre-written title, and so has some shape to it already. And that's really something that I've grappled with as well. And actually in the webinar tomorrow, we're going to be looking at youth advisory groups. And one of the presentations is from a youth advisory group that I was involved in, which was a very small piece of research. And we were commissioned to do the research. The research was already set up, you know, the topic, and actually to a certain extent, the output was already set up, and really kind of talked to young people a lot about kind of what they could be involved in and what they couldn't be involved in. And for that, a big part of it was honesty. For me, there was something really important about honesty around limitations, but also something very clearly coming from the young people who were involved in that they felt it was worth it, even though maybe they weren't involved in quite as many parts of that research as they might ideally have liked. And I think the other thing, just to echo what Jacob was saying, and I think the other time when I think maybe you have to think really carefully about co-production is if you're doing a project where you don't have the time and resources and budget for it. And that's not to say, obviously that time and resources and budget ideally would be built into the project, but sometimes that just isn't possible. And I think it's really kind of thinking carefully about what you can do meaningfully.
And I personally think that, you know, adding co-production to all research would inevitably improve it. And I think, as you say, it's not just about being like, I think maybe some people think, oh, but that means we as researchers will have to change everything and not get to do what we want to do. And I suppose, if that's your approach, then you maybe should step back and think, well, who am I doing this research for then? Am I doing it because I like the idea of doing this research and it looks good for me, or am I doing it because I actually care about the people that it's impacting?
The in-person versus online thing is like, it's a really difficult issue because, as always with groups of young people and with groups of people in general, everyone has conflicting access needs and conflicting like things going on in their lives and stuff, like, because, you know, obviously it's going to be much more difficult to have a meeting online if there's somebody that doesn't have a computer. But equally, for somebody like me who has a lot of anxiety about just walking into a room full of people, just having to join a meeting on Zoom is a lot easier. But then there's like so many like individual things that make it easier or more difficult. Like you know, I can't lip read when I'm on a Zoom call because nobody's voice is synced up to what their mouth is moving. So that's really difficult. But it's much more easy to communicate without having to speak to people if I can just drop Christina a message in the chat and she can say it for me. So I wouldn't necessarily say that online or in person that either one is going to be better or worse, but there's always going to be something that's a better fit for individuals in a group or for a group in general. And kind of all you can really do with either of them is try and fit the best you can around the people that you have in your group and try and come up with solutions to individual problems rather than looking at online as a problem in itself.
It's a funny thing to talk about. We're all a bit British about it, a little bit. I won't tell anyone about money. I won't talk about money. But obviously, it's a huge incentive. But also, I think it has an effect outside of just getting people into meetings. But also, it feels like our time and our contributions are actually being valued in a really tangible way. I think that when you're being paid however that is, and I'll get onto that in a second, but you're more likely to actually contribute things that aren't just things that you thought about for 3 seconds, like, oh, I'll just say this because I'm here and I might as well. It's actually, what can I do because I'm part of this group, I'm part of this team. What can I say, what can I do that's actually, going to advance our interests? Because it doesn't feel like we're just turning up for you lot just as like a favor. It's that actually we're a part of something and we're like I said, in the group. I think when it comes to vouchers versus cold hard cash, I mean, there's no avoiding the fact that, I think that most people will understand that, cash is better than vouchers because it's less limited and, it's money in the bank. But I think it's important to recognise the limitations of working with institutions like universities. And I think that coming back to ideas of honesty and transparency, when issues about payment and vouchers and what can we do has come up, we've had those conversations and the outcome has been very transparently fed back to us.
I struggled quite a bit with the changes in the group, partly just because I'm a massive change phobe, but partly as well just what Jacob was saying. I think something that's important to me in the youth advisory group is being self-aware and being aware of the people around you. And obviously we'd all built up relationships with each other and stuff, and then having new people come in, it can be quite scary not knowing how that person's going to respond to you. It's things basically everyone in the group knew that I was autistic from the original group, and then when new people came in, it's oh, are people going to think that I'm just rude? Are people not going to know how to react to me? And there's kind of the same fear as joining as a new person. It's the same fear of, am I going to be accepted into this group? Because you don't know whether the new people joining the group are going to accept you, and you don't know whether that's going to change.
At school, I'm quite I was, I mean, I'm not there anymore, was a very visibly queer and trans person. And a couple of times, there was once I got pulled to the side and I was asked if a presentation for Pride Week or something, was this all right, was this okay? And they were only asking me because I was the one kid that they knew. And it just doesn't feel very good, I think, is a kind of very basic way of putting it. But it just it's that you're not really valuing my opinion. It's just that I tick a box for you. Tokenism is a real problem in creating young people groups. Sometimes there'll be conversations of how do we get more BAME people involved, not for any particular reason other than, oh, we feel like we're not a diverse enough group, and so it's just that feels really tokenistic as well. And I think that so it's more just recognizing that that is a really like significant problem.
It can be a lot of wasted effort as a young person to go and do all of this work, express your views over and over again, and like produce stuff, tell people what you think, and then when that doesn't actually influence any results, it can be really frustrating, and it is just a waste of your time.